Hello, my beautiful pillow people. How was the show? For those of you, yes, wonderful, wonderful. My name is Theresa Ruth Howard, and as always, I'm thrilled to be at the Pillow as a scholar in residence, and always happy to be the closer of the season. And it's really super exciting to have Miami City Ballet here and to be in conversation this afternoon with their fearless leader, Lourdes Lopez. Well, maybe.
Thank you.
In celebration. So what's interesting is, I said in my pre-show talk, what I like about being a scholar is challenging myself to find interesting ways of having conversations and new tidbits of information and threads. Because we have these conversations, especially in the dance world. And so I did a little thinking and a little bit of digging. And I was like, we could walk the timeline of Lourdes Lopez.
That's a long one.
But we could, right? But instead, I'm just going to read a little bit about you. And then I want to dig in maybe in a different way and look in some other places for information to lift up. So, Miss Lopez, born in Cuba, immigrated to the States, resident of Miami, began dancing at 5. Stop me when I'm wrong. Began dancing at 5. By 11, was a student at SAB, and at 14 moved to New York to study full time at SAB. Now think about that, 14 years old, leaving home. But your sister went with you.
Oh my God, Wikipedia is good.
No, actually, Lourdes, I actually reviewed our conversation from Ballet is Woman, the conversation I did with all female artistic directors. And you mentioned that your sister was an usher at the theater, and you went to all the show. You finished class, and then you went over to wait for her, and you watched all the works. And so, since we're going there, and you saw diamonds, you saw diamonds, and that was the thing that made it click for you.
Yeah. So my sister Teresa, who's the middle one, I'm the baby. Then Terry's the middle one, and Barbara's the oldest. And my parents, being Cuban parents, were thrilled that I'd been given a scholarship with the School of American Ballet, and obviously they understood at this point that I was talented. But the idea of their 14-year-old going to New York in 1972, so now you all know how old I am, if you're good at math, was frightening. And the only way to get around that was to have my 19-year-old sister move as well. So Terry left Miami-Dade Community College, and she went to NYU and ended up getting an MBA there, a business administration degree. And to kind of, because we were on food stamps, we couldn't really afford the move to New York. She worked as an usher, at the time was an usherette. You can't say that anymore, right? She's now an usher at the New York State Theater, which was then called the New York State Theater. So I would finish at 7 at the Juilliard, and I would walk across the plaza with a little dinner, and she snuck me in, and I heard Beverly Sills. I mean, the opera I saw. I mean, I was exposed to things that I never saw in Miami, and one of them really was New York City Ballet, because I had never seen New York City Ballet. I had grown up with American Ballet Theater. New York City Ballet never came to Miami, and I was at School of American Ballet because obviously it was a great, had a great reputation, and they were paying for my classes, so I had already developed a relationship with them from the age of 11. But I remember, Teresa, you're absolutely right, curtain goes up, Emerald's was, Ruby's was, I'm not sure I'm understanding this, because think of my teacher was from Cuba in Miami. And then Diamonds hit. And I thought, oh my God, I am now connecting the dots. And I understood really for the first time what Balanchine had done in terms of taking this classical art form that was so old and changing it, advancing it, pushing it forward, pushing the dancers to their physical and their emotional and their artistic extremes. And it clicked. And then the next thing that clicked was Snow in Nutcracker.
So this is part of like my thread for this conversation is access, opportunity, and network, right? And so we kind of touched on the first thing, the idea that dance opens this door, this opportunity, what it takes for you to get into those doors, sneak into the doors of the theater, but then connect. And then the idea that you're in this space, this rarefied space, having access not only to dance, but really to engaging with a master, beginning your career, your professional career at 16, and then climbing the ranks. Can you talk, and you never actually thought about being a ballet dancer. That's one of the things you said in the talk. It wasn't about that. Can you talk about what dance was for you?
You know, I have to tell you honestly, I still can't talk about it. I watch about like Serenade today. How many times have I watched Serenade? How many times have I watched other companies? How many times have I danced it? And the world is still revealed to me with it. I see things in it that explain the music, that explain the choreography, that explain a specific dancer. I see Ashley and I go, oh, now I understand Ashley. I hadn't seen that before. Or even the world, it's hard to, I remember when I was 8 years old and my orthopedic boots came off in Miami. My dad, it was a very grown-up conversation. I was 8, and my dad pulled me into the kitchen. He said, we can no longer afford these ballet classes, which I was taking because I had orthopedic shoes and I had issues with my legs. So the boots are off. The doctor says there's nothing wrong with you. Is this something that you want to do? And if you want to do it, we will find a way to pay for it. And I didn't miss a beat. I said, I want to do it. And he said, why? I said, I don't know, but there's just something about it that I love. And honestly, I've never been able to explain it.
Well, in that conversation, you said something about it giving you a sense of belonging and a place of being. And I was questioning, was it the being in your body? Like Virginia Johnson talks about, she liked ballet because it was ordered, like the physical order of it. Or was it the community inside the studio that gave you this sense of being or connection?
I came from a very strong Cuban community, and I think that was a blessing as I was growing up in Miami. We spoke the language, the food was the same, the culture, we hung out. I think what I loved about ballet specifically is that I had to use my mind, I had to use my body, and I had to use in many ways, though I didn't know it was then, a heart, an expression. It was a way of expressing myself. And those 3 areas are just rarely challenged, I think, as a kid, at least for me, right? And I was very good in school, very smart. My father was upset that I was going into dancing because he really wanted me to have wanted me to go into something. But I remember going to ballet class, and it was I had to focus, I had to think, and I had to put it into my body. And then I had to, and I loved it. I loved that challenge. It separated me from anything else that I was doing or that I had done.
I think I can relate to what you're saying because there's an integration of that, like the physical puzzle. Like, how do you make this happen? The abstract, you're watching it, you got to put it on your body, you got to make it work. But then there's also this high intellectual part of it that it really does challenge your brain, like spatially. It does a little bit of everything. And so let's jump a little bit forward. So you rise through the ranks, you're a principal, you're retiring. That was quick. That was real quick.
That was really fast.
because
there went 24 years.
Look, because here's why. Because what I find so fascinating is that you go from 14 years old and like, let me back up a little bit. So graduating high school, education, what was because now the kids are online, even though they're away from home. What was your education in terms of like, were you at professional children's school?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. In the days where it, so it's just, you're making me think about all these things I haven't thought of in years. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to go back. So I become an apprentice. And I get called into the school, and they said, Mr. Balanchine is not, and I'm 15. Mr. Balanchine is not taking you to the company. He's taken Maria and Kira and all these other my colleagues. He wants you to graduate from high school. I don't think that was true. Honestly, I think he felt that I was too young. But that's the excuse that they gave me. So there was I was a professional children's school, but there was a course that you can take we called it online, but they mailed you these things, right? And you can actually take the test with the book next to you. But it was called Lincoln, Nebraska. And so I got on, and the courses that I hadn't finished at the professional children's school, I took my kitchen table. So I graduated early from the professional children's school. And at my graduation, George Balanchine hands me my diploma.
That's amazing.
It was Ellen Burstyn, because the professional children's school, so they had all these artists and that would come in because the students there want to be actors or dancers or skaters or musicians. And so it was Ellen Burstyn and George Balanchine. And I think to this day, I believe he was keeping track of whether I was going to graduate or not, just to see if I'd kept my word.
And so you graduated early because you're like, oh, that's the thing?
I graduated early because I wanted to get into the company.
Right, exactly. Like, oh, that's the thing that's
there was a
stopping
carrot in front of me.
Finished. Right? So, and I asked that question because after you leave ballet, you move into all of these other areas that are like ballet adjacent, but that ballet technically, for a formal training, you had none. So you move first into television, right? Producing and writing arts, segments for NBC. And one of the things that you mentioned was you were a single mother and you're like, I need to work, right? And so that's another thread, right? What did it take for you to transition? What type of fortitude? We know that ballet sort of helps you organize your thinking, but you move into that space. You move into executive directing the ballet, the Balanchine Foundation. These are spaces and the criteria that technically you didn't have the criteria for, right? Like the education, like, do you have a BA in whatever? You move into these spaces. How is that possible?
I don't know. I think I was desperate. Theresa, I think a lot of it has to do with my parents. I have to tell you. So there was, and I say this story to my daughters. The firstborn, who's now 32, at the time was 6 months old, and I had torn my calf again. So I was now out of New York City Ballet for about 2.5 years. I hurt myself. I had surgery. I decided to go to school, to go to Fordham University while I was pregnant. I decided to have a baby because I thought I'm going to do all the things I can't do because I've been dancing. And then I tried to go back to New York City Ballet, and that afternoon, before the evening rehearsal of Barocco, my first performance back after 2.5 years, I tear my calf. So I fly down to Miami with Adrielle, who's 6 months old, and I'm walking down the street on 8th Street, across from Versailles. I don't know if the coffee place. And I'm crying. I'm carrying Adrielle, and my mother's in front of me with my sister Terry and her 2 daughters. And I'm crying, and I'm saying, what you don't understand, Mother, is that I don't know what else to do. I've only been an answer. And I'm sobbing on the street of Miami with my child. And I think my mother just had it. And she turned around to me, and she said, let me tell you something. She said, you are 31 years old. You are young, you are healthy, you have money in the bank, and you have people around you, and you can't figure out what to do? And I went,
sounds like a black mother.
That was a Cuban mother. And I thought, and so that was the attitude also of my father, who you figure it out, but you have to survive. And then I was also curious. I went to school when I was injured. I wanted to.
And what were you studying?
I went to Fordham, and I took a writing composition 101 with Dr. Wasserman because I didn't know how to write. Run on sentence and fragments were not my forte. So I took writing, and I took an art history course. I took a math course. I took a science. I took an acting course. So no necessarily a degree, but I just kept political science because I was really curious about Latin America and what had happened in Cuba. And that was really interesting because I came back after doing this whole paper on Latin American revolutions and saying, we really should revolutionize. And I remember I went home to my dad and I said, Dad, Castro, in 1957 in front of the plaza, oh my God, and he was like, because I'd never learned this stuff. So for me, I'm learning I'm learning about things that 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds have the unfortunate privilege, most, not all, of. It's an education, and I was curious. I'd missed that part of my life.
This is really beautiful to hear, because I think your story and the way that you're sharing it really illuminates both like the beauty of the ballet world and like the other side of the ballet world that keeps dancers sort of infantilized and doesn't, like, in the old paradigm, let's say, right, that didn't encourage dancers to go, your artistry can be exponentially expanded through knowledge and education and intellectual curiosity. And but you had it, and it allowed you to transcend what you even thought you were. Like, you don't know anything else, but you actually did,
I think that dancers, it's a great point that you make, Theresa. I think that dancers, what they don't understand is that everything you need to know, you've learned in a ballet class. You've learned how to show up on time. You've learned how to be respectful, hopefully, to the person next to you and to the person in front of you. You've learned accountability, right? You've learned to figure things out on your own with hopefully not being, spoon-fed. You've learned how to take on your responsibility and understand that you've got a performance a week later that you have to figure out. You've got to, you don't. What dancers lack is an education, not intelligence.
Absolutely. And I think a level of agency to see value in all of those skills and technologies. Like, they are completely transferable. And oftentimes, I'm going to call it the old paradigm because I'm trying to push it to the new paradigm. The old paradigm made you dependent. Like, it's the idea that like, if you don't, you should be grateful for this job. And yes, you are grateful for the job, but it doesn't mean that you are not a whole person if you're not in the job.
You're not subservient to it.
Right. And also, like, there's value. Okay, this is going in a whole other direction. But the idea, like, even the hierarchy in ballet, the idea that there is great honor in being a corps member. And the idea, you'll hear people dancing, oh, I was only in the corps. And you're like, there's not an only. That there's absolute beauty and honor in the work that you do, and you're valuable regardless. And but that's a whole other, that's the tangential, but it's not.
No, but it's important to talk about it, and I think you make a very good point. We're all blades of grass. The show doesn't go on if there's one missing. It's not Barocco if you've got 7 girls, right? So let's go into the idea of, let's jump to your entering the field of artistic directorship. Now, I did a talk, I mentioned it, Ballet is Woman, with I think there were 5 female artistic directors, and not a one of them ever thought about being an artistic director themselves. Think about that. It was Lourdes, Tamara Rojo, Virginia Johnson, Susan Jaffe, Wendy Whalen. None of them ever thought of it. And it was somebody else that had to sort of like prompt and say, you can do that. And so can you talk about how you enter that space? Well, it was the Miami City Ballet Board of Directors that decided I could do it. I don't know. I didn't have a role model in front of me. I didn't. I only had men. Most of my teachers, my beloved teachers, were female. No one ever said to me, do you think that you could, would you have an interest? That was never, I don't know. I don't know what was spoken about. It just wasn't. There was the world that I grew up in. If you were female and you stopped dancing, you either got married and moved on, or you started your own little ballet school and you started teaching, or you taught at a university. But, really running a ballet company as an artistic director was just nothing, was something that never entered my mind. I think, when I think back on my life, it seems that everything that I've done from stepping off the stage at the age of 39 has somehow taught me aspects of what an artistic director needs. And the greatest lesson was really starting Morphosis with Christopher Wheeldon. Though that didn't quite work out, I understood the what I call the back office of a ballet company and the front office of a ballet company. And then you just, I don't know.
But Lourdes, here's the thing. When I was researching and looking and drawing the line through, you're like overqualified. You were overqualified to be an artistic director, quite frankly. Having held, no. The career that you had, the ballets that you danced, right? The people that you worked with, not only starting a company, being an executive director, you probably had more skills and knowledge about business and how organizations run than the average white man who gets that role. Straight up and real. That's just true. That's true. And it's important to not minimize that, because walking in there with your career and the added knowledge, that's not...
Well, I joke about it now, but you're absolutely right. When I got the job at Miami City Ballet in September of 2012, of all the interviews that I did, and I did a lot of interviews because it was it was in the press, and the way that the whole process took place, the transition took place, was a bit of a nightmare. Not one person asked me, what does it feel like to be a female artistic director? Zero. The question was, what is it? Oh, you're taking after Edward. How do you think that's going to feel? I mean, what are you going to do? He did this, he did that. And I think back now, 10 years later, where everyone's asking me, Lourdes, what does it feel like to be a female artistic director? I've been doing this for 10 years. Where have you been? So now it's at the forefront of all of our minds, which is absolutely right. Like so many things are at the forefront of our minds. But it was such a courageous step for the Miami City Ballet Board in 2012 to hire a Latina who had no experience. Yes, I had the pedigree. And yes, I had the intelligence.
But Lourdes, that's really generally the criteria. That up till now, that has been the criteria for artistic directors. Period. Having a name, being a star, generally the company that you came through, it's all pedigree. It has nothing to do with experience or even vision. Really, it's about how you can raise money and curate.
Then it's the perception that only men can raise money. And there you go.
And should be in power. and because
to
ballet,
be a power, yeah.
Correct. There we go. Now we solved
Boy,
that.
were they wrong.
The other thing that was really interesting to me that you said was that you were surprised at how much power the artistic director had, right? And that when
Jeff, you're not listening, are you?
Well, I mean, this is a decade ago, right? So I'm interested, like you were like, you say you want red, they give you red.
I said that to you?
Yes.
That's the example I always use.
Yeah, you said that, and you were like, it was like, look, a little crazy, and that you, when you came in, were questioning yourself, and you wanted to act. Like, how has your leadership evolved over a decade? You're coming in, and you're sort of uncertain. This is a new idea of being in a position of I am the decider, right? To a decade later, where clearly you've established yourself. How has your leadership evolved over this decade?
I'm not so sure that it's evolved all that much. So when I very first walked into Miami City Ballet, it was a very, very, I can talk about it now, very tense environment. Nobody knew me. I had really no relationship to that company. It's not a company that I took class with or I grew up around. Like I said, the transition was very difficult. It was played out in the press. And I walked into a building I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know where the bathrooms were. And I was heading not only the company, but the school. So every once in a while I make very smart decisions. And I decided that I was going to walk into Miami City Ballet and I was going to ask people, first of all, to help. Second of all, to explain what the company was about. How does it work? Who's who? What is a rep? I mean, I just started asking questions. I remember having a meeting with the dancers, and I said, I'm here to make this happen, but I need your help because I can't do it on my own because I don't know this. And it was really, I think it was the smartest thing that I did, walking in saying, I need your help. And in a funny way, though, now I'm much more confident about the decisions that I make. I'm still doing that. I mean, I just had an hour, you saw me, I had an hour and a half meeting with Roma saying, I need you to look at this casting and I need someone to talk about it. Because I'm not God. I'm not omnipotent. It's important to hear other people's views, other ideas. When people say something, it makes me think differently. So I enjoy that camaraderie that I have with those around me to question and even question me. What was funny about when I walked in is that I would say, I don't know, I think it should be a red costume. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, okay, she wants a red costume. And I was so not used to that in my life, that so you have to be very careful when you...
Yes. Yeah, it's a very, and that's that idea of asking questions, a level of humility in saying that even though I'm at the top of the hierarchy, I'm not infallible. Like I don't know everything, and that the idea that it's a we and a us, not a I, even if people are treating you like it's the I, is really interesting to think about, especially now as we're going through this shift. And speaking of that shift, wait, hold on, let me go back. So Miami City Ballet, when you inherited it, was it a stable organization or not? It's just a question. I'm going somewhere with this.
Toby, you want to answer this question?
Oh my God, Toby, are you Toby?
Yes, that's
Oh my
Toby,
God,
our founder.
Nice to meet you. I've been talking about you all week, only in the best of ways. Well, would you like to say?
It was extremely difficult. People didn't understand why it was happening. I would have to say to them, if the people that founded this company, that put not only a lot of money into it, but hours and hours of their time, feel it's something to be done, it has to be done, take a big breath, and let's see what happens, but let's give it a chance, because we love this company, we want it to survive, and I trust that we have picked, and we did, the perfect person with a vision and growing experience to lead the company, and this is the proof of the pudding that we're here for this glorious week.
Notice how she diplomatically left some names out.
Just a few.
So I asked that question because, have you heard about the glass ceiling? Okay, all the women are like, yes. So it's the idea that oftentimes women don't get opportunities of leadership until organizations are on that glass cliff. And so, right? So that if it fails, then it's clearly the woman's fault. Forget how we got to the cliff. And I think we're seeing that play out in a number of different spaces, not just with women, but specifically with people of color now, because there's a rush to put people of color into these positions. And oftentimes they're in organizations that are teetering. So we have to watch that, be mindful. And so, Toby, to your point, 10 years later, right, the strength of the company, and they look incredible.
Thank you.
They look incredible. And so kudos to you.
Thank you.
Going back to my thread of the idea that these dancers, I call them the species, this generation is so vastly different from generations before. And rightfully so. We've got the interwebs, we've got the Instagram where before you'd have to ask the press person if to speak to a dancer, and now they have their own agents and sliding into the DMs. They want more information. They want more agency. They want to be more involved. Well, so they say sometimes. But how are you dealing with that in terms of, because that is a definite shift from who you were as a dancer. And now, even a decade has changed so much. So how are you dealing with this new sort of like breed of dancer?
The word agency is really interesting. So I've always felt that as a dancer, dancing for Mr. Balanchine, he gave me tremendous agency. So here are the steps. This is where you have to be. But I just really want to see what Lourdes is going to do with it. And so I think that empowers a dancer tremendously. But I just wanted to put that out there. Right now, I'm totally for the social media. I'm very pro understanding that they have their own ways of looking at their careers, that they want to go to school, which is fantastic, or they want to get married, whatever it is, I'm totally on board with that. Once they enter the studio and once they enter the theater, I hate to say it, it's my world. And it's not a dictatorship, right? But there is a responsibility that I have, or that I feel, to the dance that is being danced on the stage, to the dancer that is dancing that dance. And it's not like you make these decisions unilaterally on my own, but let me just give you an example. I started noticing last season that our dancers, the female dancers, were making a lot of noise on stage with their pointe shoes. And I waited and waited, and I kept debating, how do I do this in a way for them? Because I think you have to be generous, I think you have to be thoughtful, and I think you have to be respectful. Those days of pushing someone over, being nasty, are done. And it's not something that I ever, even when I had teachers that did that with me, I never appreciated it. I felt that there was no reason for it. But I was debating, should I bring it up, should I not bring it up? And finally, I called the girls before a performance of Diamonds in Naples, in Miami. And I said, I just have to tell you this. I am responsible for Diamonds. That responsibility has been given to me. And you're ruining it because I hear every single step. And I said it very nicely, very nicely. I said, so I'm here to help you. Talk to me. Lourdes, what did you do with your shoes? Whatever you need from me, more shoes, whatever it is, talk to me. All I need to do is not hear you on the stage. And the girls, to their benefit, the ladies, to their benefit, took it to heart. Because I had presented it in a way of saying, I am making you look better. I need to make this ballet look better. And I need your help in doing that. So I think, Theresa, there's a way of having these conversations. They're not easy conversations, especially when you have a dancer who is in a funky place in their career, and which happens, and emotionally not there, or whatever it is. I think communication is critical. It's critical, and it's something I look back and I always think, I wish I had spoken to Mr. Balanchine more. I wish I had been braver so many times that I would have because he was there for us, right? But I was just nervous because he was, Balanchine. But I think communication is critical. I think when you explain to artists why you're doing what you're doing, that it is for the art form and it is for you. That's where I kind of draw the line, and that's why I say you've entered now my world.
And so, the idea of transparency, and I think that this is where the concept of agency for this generation comes in, is the idea that there is an expectation that I should know. And it does come from the idea that we know way too much about everything, right? Like, people are oversharing to a degree. But then there's the idea that a lot of the things, the not so good things, happen in the dark. And it happened because we didn't know. And it happened because people wouldn't say. And so there is this we're in this brackish water where we're trying to find the balance between how do you lead a company and take that responsibility? Because it falls on your shoulders, right? But also create, I suppose, a collaborative space. And when I say collaborative, I mean like the holding of the organization. Like Arthur Mitchell used to say, you represent something larger than yourself, and buy-in so that everybody is taking care of the company for themselves. And it's a hard space. I mean, I do not envy you or the other leaders, because it's really it's almost like a fingerprint. There's no blanket way to do it across organizations, because it's all about the people in the organization. So, yeah.
It is about the people, but I also think it's about the vision, right? And so why are we here? It's a vision that people buy into. It's a mission and a reason for being. And then you have to have the individuals around you that are, it's like the dancers, they all look different, but they're all kind of on that same road moving forward. It's the same thing with staff. I think it takes tremendous amount of trust in saying, this is what we want to be. All right, is everybody on board? Yes, we are. Okay, so everyone has to do their job. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but that's just life. You keep on going because you so believe in the end. If there is an end result, you so believe in it.
So let's talk about vision. 2022. I'm going to give you 10 more years. I don't know if you want 10 more years. Let's just hypothetically. What is your vision for the company moving forward? What is it that you either haven't accomplished, or what would you like to begin to investigate for Miami City Ballet moving into the future?
I use the word vision loosely because I don't, when people say, oh, well, I take inspiration from, or my vision. It's like I go, oh, please give me a break. We're doing that ballet because people come in. Okay, so let's just the business. It's a business side of it. I think that there's so much that I'm proud of at Miami City Ballet, and I think that the one thing that I have not accomplished that I am now focusing on is really a closer. We've started connecting with our community really a lot more, and it feels wonderful. And I think in a very generous and a very honest, and I think in a very real way. Where I'd love it to go is I'd love for the company to focus on Latin and South America, because I feel that it's a region. Obviously because I'm close to it, but I think it's a region that is struggling right now economically and politically. I think it's a region that many are not necessarily focused on. I think it's a region that we can connect and really, Virginia actually, during this whole COVID and we were getting together and I said, I remember I called Virginia up and I said, I need to talk to you because I need to understand how everybody talks about community and everybody talks about connecting to, how do I do this? And Virginia said to me, and I'll never forget, focus on the people around you. She said, you can't change the world. Just focus first on the people around you. And I think that's what we did, especially during the COVID years. Miami City Ballet really, we kind of leaned in and said, we're here to help you. And it felt great. And all of a sudden, it opened up a world for us. I'd like to do something similar with Latin and South America. And I think we could, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just think that given where we are geographically, the gateway to the Americas, given how removed I know those dancers in Latin and South America feel, and those directors, they have such little access to what is going on in American dance. They want it. They want to understand what their neighbors are doing. And so that's one area that I keep in the back of my head going, how do I do this? How do I get the company that foot in the door?
I have a question because the word community is really interesting, because how we define community is really specific. And so having just been down in Miami and learning that there are multiple communities down there. So are you saying that like Miami City Ballet is the community for Miami City Ballet is more the Latine, and does that include the Afro Latine? Because that's a whole, like, the morass of what that means to say the Latin America. Does that make sense?
Yes, I know what you're saying. So when I say community from Miami City Ballet within South Florida, I'm talking about the people around us. So I'm not distinguishing nor marginalizing whether they're Latina, Latinos, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Mexicans. It is who are the people that live here in South Florida that Miami City Ballet, through what it puts on the stage, through its community engagement programs, through its school, through the services, the artistic services that we provide, how do we change those lives? I mean, that's how, when I think of community, that's the word. I mean, that's where I go. I'm not going to a specific area or neighborhood, though we do that, but mine is broader. And that's how I feel about Latin and South America, that, hey, you know, it's a bigger problem.
Yeah, I mean, it when I think about it, it's the idea of what are we really talking about? Because the idea of Miami, there's little Haiti, there's little Bohemia, and how does that, let me go back. But I understand what you're saying. I understand because I come out of Dance Theater of Harlem. And so the question is, I'm looking for a bit of brownness, always. And so wherever it comes from, that is one of the things that I think everybody is, not everybody, that's not true, but I think that is the question, right? When we're talking about ballet in 2022 and moving forward. And is that vision, does that vision encompass that?
No. So it's really interesting. And I understand that you're looking at brownness. I totally get it. I'm looking at it from the belief that what this art form can do, because of what it did for me. So I don't care what race you are, and I don't care what color you are, and I don't care where you came from. I'm only telling you that what we do, what you saw on stage, if it's done at a really high level, and if it's done well, and if you put works on stage that reach people, good is good, right? You can't. You're going to impact a life regardless of, ballet. I can't even say dance. Ballet has changed. I mean, every day my life changes because of this art form, and so I think that's how I want. That's what I want when I think of community. How do I bring the ballet to them?
Thank you for that. Are there any questions, comments? So this is a question. Wait, what's the question? Oh, sorry. The question is, so she was a part of the search committee, and there was a moment when Bob, I'm not sure who Bob is, Bob Gottlieb said, no, you.
So Sandy, I wasn't part of the search committee. There was a search committee of one, Bob Gottlieb.
So it was Bob and Bob.
About male authority.
Right, clearly.
There you go. Bob Gottlieb was search committee of one. Yeah. No, so I wasn't. But so Robert Gottlieb is a very well-known, Bob Gottlieb, very well-known editor, Joseph Heller, Toni Morrison, presidency of Knopf for many, many years, all the Carol books. He's just brilliant. And he is, to me, a mentor, and he is the one that actually taught me how to walk into Miami City Ballet, because I would call him and I would say, they're not talking to me. And he goes, of course they're not talking to you. They're artistic director. Get over it. That type of conversations. So Bob, very close to Miami City Ballet, was very close to Edward. And the board went to him and said, we need to look for an artistic director. So Bob, because we're so close in New York, would call me and say, Lourdes, I have to meet with you. And we would go through the list of people. And Bob would say, what do you think about this name? And what do you think about this? Oh, I don't know. And what do you think about this? And so this went on for about almost a year. of me in New York meeting with Bob Gottlieb and Bob checking off names, right? And then one day, Sandy's absolutely right. We were at the diner, because he always eats at a diner on 2nd Avenue. And he looked up and he said, "What about you?" And I was just like, and I said, "Well,
damn, I should have pushed somebody forward."
No, I looked at him and I said, I looked at him and I thought, yeah, I thought, what about me, right? I'm from Miami. I speak Spanish. I'm Balanchine. And I said to Bob, yes, but my husband, my life is in New York. I can't. So I went home and I said, "George, this has just been proposed." And so Sandy's right. It was Bob Gottlieb.
Thank you for lifting that up. Yes, ma'am. So this is a question about, again, that generational shift. There's all this agency. There's a different way of looking at the work. How do you bring these new dancers back or root them in the tradition, the Balanchine tradition specifically, to give them those old sense of values that are so important to the art form?
So it is such a great question. And it is such a difficult thing to do. And it's something that I know that I think about every day when I go into a rehearsal and when I go into teach class or a tech rehearsal. And I do it through training, right? You do it in class. And you are very specific because it's not arbitrary. There's a way of doing that step. In respect to Balanchine, frankly, because we dance so many of his ballets, that teaches the dancers that they have to train a certain way to be able to do justice to the role. And so it's kind of easy, right? It's built into the rep. What is fantastic, and I will say it comes from the top down. What is fantastic about Miami City Ballet dancers is that they have such a commitment and such integrity about other choreographers' works. So and you saw that in Diversion of Angels, we have never, ever in the history of Miami City Ballet in 37 years done a Martha Graham piece. And I was like going, oh my God.
Now, did they ever take Graham? Did they take Graham classes?
Oh. No, it's just not. But yet they're so, and I think it comes from the respect that they have of the Balanchine canon of understanding there's a way of doing this, and the way of doing this is that training. And so when Peggy and Peter came to do the Diversion of Angels, they said, we have to give them an hour before rehearsals of some Martha Graham. I said, do whatever you need to do because it starts at the bar. It starts with the training. But I think you have to, Mr. Balanchine used to say dancers are like horses. You have to lead them. You have to show them what you want, and that's what we do every day.
I think it's like you're speaking to the integrity of both the step, the work, the training, the art form, and the culture, right, of the organization, because that's a work ethic. Like you walk into the room and there's an expectation of how we do things here. And so unfortunately, we are at time. Lourdes, thank you so much.
Theresa, you're the best.
For sharing
Thank you.
so beautifully.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.